Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan with your final hot take on the evening. I have so many topics, but I had to pick one, and I feel this is the most important. For those of you who don't know, Glenn Greenwald is an intrepid investigative reporter. He's been around for years. He worked at Salon, then left Salon, and I think he was with The Guardian, and then after The Guardian, there's some overlap there. He eventually founded his own media company called The Intercept with some other reporters, and he's been forced to leave The Intercept essentially because his own media company wouldn't wouldn't post this article about the Biden scandal without cutting out a bunch of stuff that criticized Joe Biden. It's gotten that bad. The media is so incredibly partisan, and you could search online. I'll try to find the links for you and put them in the thing here. But he has a very interesting letter explaining why he's leaving, and in that letter you get an insight on just how bad the partisanship is. Literally, like, all his editors are just like, no, you got to take the Biden stuff out. And he even invited them to write their own articles, calling him an idiot for whatever he was writing here. And when you talk about Glenn Greenwald, he is a very liberal guy. He has always been very liberal. He is not a Trump fan at all, by any stretch. So, and he's a very good journalist. I mean, he's the Edward Snowden guy. He broke that story. So I'm just going to read a little bit of his article, which you can now find on Substack. I'll put the link in. Substack, you might remember, is the same place you can find Matt Taibbi. So these two guys have been basically forced out of almost everywhere so they can actually do investigative reportings. And both these guys do deep dives. I mean, Matt goes into financial stuff way deep, the machinations of, like, Fannie Mae and all the housing bubble stuff. Like, he knows all that. Now, I don't necessarily agree with his economic outlook or his solutions, but that's not really what he does. He reports this stuff and how corrupt it is and everything, and then leaves it to other people to sort out. But he really knows his stuff. Same thing with Glenn, especially with stuff like corruption and the NSA. He used to be a lawyer, so he really just kills it. It's very impressive, some of the stuff. So let me read a little bit on what he calls the real scandal. U.S. media uses falsehoods to defend Joe Biden from Hunter's emails. So you can see why Biden supporters don't want Glenn to just rip them. Publication by the New York Post 2 weeks ago of emails from Hunter Biden's laptop relating to Vice President Joe Biden's work in the Ukraine, and subsequent articles from other outlets concerning the Biden's family pursuit of business opportunities in China, provoked an extraordinary efforts by a de facto union of media outlets, Silicon Valley giants, and the intelligence community to suppress these stories. One outcome is that the Biden campaign concluded rationally that there is no need for the front-running president candidate to address even the most basic and relevant questions raised by these materials. Rather than condemn Biden for ignoring these questions, the natural instinct of a healthy press when it comes to a presidential election, journalists have instead led the way in concocting excuses to justify his silence. And boy, is that true. Because unless you're following this stuff, no one knows about it. I mean, ask your friends. Ask your friends who watch the TV news what they think. And they're going to say, oh, I think I heard something about that, if they've heard anything at all. Isn't that a bunch of just Russian BS? I don't know. I don't want to read the whole thing, but I'll definitely put the link to the article After the Post's first article, both the newspapers and other news outlets have published numerous other emails and texts purportedly written to and from Hunter, reflecting his efforts to induce his father to take actions as vice president beneficial to the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, on whose board of directors Hunter sat for a monthly payment of $50,000. I thought it was more than that. As well as proposals for lucrative business deals in China that traded on his influence with his father. Individuals included some of the email chains have confirmed the content's authenticity. One of Hunter's former business partners, Tony Bublinsky, now he spells it differently. Maybe he hadn't checked this draft. Has stepped forward on the record to confirm the authenticity of many emails and to insist that Hunter, along with Joe Biden's brother Jim, were planning on including the former vice president in at least one deal in China. And GOP pollster Frank Luntz, who appeared in one of the published email chains, appeared to confirm the authenticity as well, though he refused to answer follow-up questions about it. Oh, I didn't know that. So that's a bit of new info. If you haven't seen the interview Tucker did with Tony Bublinsky, check it out. You probably have to go to the Fox News website to find it, but you can definitely find some of the clips. Thus far, no proof has been offered by Bublinsky that Biden ever consummated his participation in any of these discussed deals. See, this is the nuance I think Glenn brings to the table here. Yes, these deals were in the mix with Hunter, but did Biden, I'm not saying Biden isn't a sleazebag. I think he totally is. But he may have well looked at the deals and said, no way, man, we'll never get away with this. The Wall Street Journal says that it has found no corporate records reflecting that a deal was finalized and that the text messages and emails related to the venture were provided to the Journal by Mr. Bobulinski, mainly from the spring and summer of 2017, don't show either Hunter Biden or James Biden discussing a role for Joe Biden in the venture, unquote. But nobody claimed any such deals had been consummated, so the conclusion that one had not been does not negate the story. Moreover, some texts and emails whose authenticity has not been disputed state Hunter was adamant that any discussions about involvement of the vice president be held only verbally and never put in writing. Whew, there's a lot here. And then he's got links to other articles, including Matt Taibbi, about some of the earlier claims with the Post. The repair store owner confirmed this narrative in interviews with news outlets and under the penalty of prosecution to a state Senate committee. He also provided the receipt purportedly signed by Hunter. Neither Hunter nor the Biden campaign has denied these claims. And that's a big factor too. The Bidens aren't denying it. And the probable reason why they're not denying it is because if they do get dragged in the court over this, that'll be bad. A flat out denial will be bad. Because then the lawyers will say, well, you lied, And once you lie in court, you're in big trouble. It kills your credibility. Once they can prove you're a liar, then the lawyers could just hammer and hammer and hammer you, right? They can just say, well, how do we know you're telling the truth now? And it goes on to talk about Silicon Valley and that censorship. This was Washington Post. Was this an email? No, this was an op-ed where he said, we must treat the Hunter Biden leaks as if they were a foreign intelligence operation, even if they probably aren't. And then, they admit there's no Russian involvement, even though that was something people were touting in the beginning of this, that it was Russian propaganda. Oh, and this was great. This is the NPR editor. Why haven't you seen any stories? This is on their Twitter. Why haven't you seen any stories from NPR about the New York Post Hunter Biden story? Read more this week in the newsletter. We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste our listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. And that shows you, where the NPR is. They're in the bag for Biden, in my view. I mean, that's clear. I mean, if this is such a waste of time, show us why it's a waste of time. I mean, it's a big story. Prove him innocent. If he's so innocent, and you know that, how do you know that? How do you know the story's just a bunch of BS? Prove it wrong. They can't, I don't think. He goes after Leslie Stahl to justify. And this is Glenn again, to justify her own show's failure to cover the story. 60 Minutes Leslie Stahl resorted to an entirely different justification. It can't be verified, the CBS reporter claimed when confronted by President Trump in an interview about her program's failure to cover the Hunter Biden documents. When Trump insisted there were multiple ways to verify the materials on the laptop, Stahl simply repeated the same phrase. It can't be verified. Yeah, that was sad, because I used to have a lot of respect for 60 Minutes and Leslie Stahl, although I stopped watching 60 Minutes, but now I can see, like, man, that's a waste of time now. That used to be the place. When TV was a thing and you watch TV, that was the place to see investigative reporting. It is sad to see that. So this goes on and on. I don't want to read the whole thing. Glenn is very thorough. Wow, this is just a mountain of evidence here. Well, not evidence. It's an article. It's an article. Some of it, it's not really his opinion, but he's showing various things that support his point in the article. And really, this is about the press. This is about the press. But the real scandal that has been proven is not the former vice president's misconduct, but that of his supporters and allies in the U.S. media. As Taibbi's headline put it, with the Hunter Biden expose, suppression is the bigger scandal than the actual story. That's why Glenn is on Substack too. That's why they're both on Substack. It's literally too hot for 99% of the media, because they're all in the bag for the Democrats, unless they're in the bag for the GOP or Trump, and they don't want to cover it. That's why all the guys who are covering this are the Gateway Pundit, the National Pulse, Fox News is sort of barely covering it, but they're covering it. Forget about the New York Times. I mean, this should have been front page at the New York Times for weeks. Would have been an explosive story. Same thing with the Washington Post. Back in the 70s, they would have been the guys on top of this. But not anymore. Now they're just, in my view, just a logo and a name and a corporate byline to sell subscriptions, basically. They're clickbait. Wow. I'll just give the wrap up here, but you should read the article. Glenn is a really good writer. As my colleague Lee Fang put it on Sunday, the partisan double standard in the media are mind-boggling this year, and much of the supposedly left independent media is just as cowardly and conformist as the mainstream corporate media. Everyone is reading the room and acting out of fear. Discussing his story from Sunday, Taibbi summed it up the most important point this way. The whole point is that the press loses its way when it cares more about who benefits from information than whether it's true. So I say you got to support these guys. You got to go to Substack and support these guys, because Glenn has left a very lucrative position in order, based on principles, based on his principles, based on the truth. And we have to have truth. You can't have a media without the truth. When Trump says, the press are the enemy of the people, he's not talking about guys like this. These guys are the truth. You can't hammer these guys based on evidence. These guys are, him and Matt Taibbi and a bunch of other people, they are truth tellers. And yeah, they make mistakes, but they They have it. The other guys, they're just I don't know, they're slobbering at the trough of the people in power. Blah, 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 blah. Give me some of that power. I'll report what you want. They're compromised, either by power or who knows. Operation Mockingbird, the CIA. It could still be, you know, and they don't even. And look, you could buy these guys for a song. 90% of these guys, you buy them for nothing. They don't make a lot of money. They don't get a lot of prestige. You know, in my game, Complete Mafia, one of the skills in the game is exploit weakness. You find somebody's weakness and exploit it. It's not hard. I mean, look at all the weaknesses on a Hunter Biden. He'd be easy to exploit. Pretty easy. Get a couple of hookers and some crack and a nice hotel room. I think Hunter would be very amenable to a meeting with you. So, get to the Substack. I'll leave a link in the description and read Glenn Greenwald.